Happy Monday, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful spring break. We are starting our tail end of the year where we are going to be trekking along, making sure that we are brushing up and reviewing a lot of the important things that we've learned this year, while also preparing for state testing and wrapping up our final writing assignments. So from spring break to the end of the year may seem like a long time, but it really isn't. It is pretty a short amount of time. And so we are going to be focusing on some crucial elements in the coming weeks. This week, we're going to be focusing on poetry. Now, we've read a lot of poems this year. We've probably read about 15. Let's get my face on the other side. Come on, you can do it. There we go. We've probably read about 15 poems this year. Well, this week we are going to be only focusing on poetry, and each day you're going to read at least one short poem, and we're going to learn some important significance and meaning around that poem. And then at the end of class, you're going to get to show me what you learned through an assignment. And some of these assignments I'm really excited about this week. They're going to be more creative. Some of these are going to be more of a reflection process for you. So hopefully this will be a very fun week for those of you who enjoy poetry. So today we're going to be reading Nothing Gold Can Stay and The Dragonfly. Both of these poems are fairly short, and that they both deal with time and rhyme, which is a rhyme in itself. So do you ever feel sad about things or people who change over time? Well, today that's going to be the focus of our passage, about time. And so we're going to get ready to look at how two different poets use imagery and images from the natural world to capture our attention and imagination. So some of our goals for today are we're going to use reading strategies to help us understand Nothing Gold Can Stay and The Dragonfly. And we're going to answer some comprehension questions. We're going to examine how word choice creates meaning and tone. We're going to determine a theme of these poems and then analyze the influence of rhymes on specific stanzas of a poem. Now, all the words we're going to be going over today are review, but let's just go over them one more time to make sure that you understand what these mean. So remember, imagery is language that creates a mental picture by appealing to the senses. So what we can see, touch, what we can smell, taste, smell, all of these contribute to imagery. Figurative language is language that uses things like personification, metaphor, and similes for effect rather than actually just saying the meaning. An allusion is a reference to a familiar literary or historical person or event used to make an idea more easily understood. So both of our poems are going to deal with different allusions that are going to help us understand the meaning of the whole poem. A rhyming couplet is two consecutive lines of poetry that rhyme. And finally, this one you guys definitely know, theme, the main message that an author wants to communicate to a reader. So as always, we're always circling back to the idea of theme because everything we read will have a theme. So some of the words we're going to see in our poem today are a little strange. We may not have seen them before. So let's go over what they mean and how they're used in a sentence, and then you can better recognize them as we read today. So the first one is diaphanous. Diaphanous. The trail of her gown was diaphanous when she walked. She looked like she was floating on air. This just means that it was extremely delicate, fragile, see-through, or vague. Grappling. As the rock crumbled, the climber began grappling for the rope. This just means holding tightly or seizing firmly, like I grappled with this. Iridescent. I was enchanted by the iridescence of the soap bubbles in my bath. This is a multicolored light that changes or refracts as it moves. A hue, the fields of tulips offered every possible hue to please the eye. This is a variety of shades of color, the appearance or quality of something. And then finally, subsides. Once the rain stops, the water level of the flood subsides. This is to settle, shrink, sink down, or become smaller. So, like I said, we're going to be reading two poems today. The first one is written by Robert Frost, and the second poem is written by Louise Bogan. But before we read their poems, let's learn a little bit more about these poets who you may be familiar with or not. So Robert Frost, our first poet, was born in San Francisco in 1874. He worked as a teacher, a cobbler, and an editor. He published his first poem in 1894, and so he was 20 years old. Frost lived in England from 1912 to 1915, and his work focused largely on the people and the landscape of rural New England, but still dealt with many universal themes and ideas. By the 1930s, Robert Frost was America's most celebrated poet, and he won 4 Pulitzer Prizes and lectured extensively at universities all around the world. Robert Frost died in 1963. Now, here's going to be a complicated question that you can get some bonus points for. Right now, I want you to email me with the answer to this question. What else have we read by Robert Frost this year? We have read one other poem by Robert Frost. So this is going to take a little bit of research, but if you can successfully email me the title of this poem, then you're going to get some bonus points in the grade book. So email me at asmith@sheltonschools.org with what else we have read by Robert Frost. There's one other poem we've read by this poet. The other poet that we are going to be learning about today is Louise Bogan, and she was born in a small mill town in Maine in 1897. Her childhood was difficult, and poetry became an escape for her. Louise Bogan published her first volume of poetry in 1923, and she was the Poet Laureate of the United States from 1945 to 46, and many people considered the precise language and vivid imagery of her work to be some of the finest examples of American poetry. Louise Bogan died in 1970. So 2 very influential and notable poets, and we're going to be reading part of their work today. So the power of imagery. Poetry is usually tied to imagery because of the language that we can paint. And imagery is the name given to a type of poetic language. It is used when a writer helps readers to create a mental picture of the writer's work, and imagery appeals to each of the senses. It allows readers to see, hear, smell, taste, or feel things in their imagination. For example, an author may write that the sunlight danced on the ocean. This may help readers see how a day at the beach looks, or a writer may want to help readers imagine working in a car factory. The author may describe the setting by saying that the noise of metal on metal filled the room and swam around the character's ears. All of these give us a more vivid picture of what we're reading. So let's take a moment and learn a little bit about imagery from this awesome YouTube video. So hopefully you will be able to hear the sound for this. So give me one moment.
We have 5 senses. Writers often appeal to these senses to bring their stories to the reader's imagination. For example, what sense is the author appealing to in this sentence? The author is appealing to the sense of taste. What other senses might a writer appeal to? Can you envision this moment? This is because its writer is appealing to the sense of sight. Can you hear it? This is because its writer uses words that suggest sounds. Writers also can suggest the sense of touch. Finally, writers can appeal to the sense of smell. All of these examples use imagery. Imagery appears when a writer appeals to the 5 senses. Imagery helps bring the passage to the reader's imagination. Which senses does this sentence appeal to?
All right, so now that we know a little bit more about imagery, let's take a moment to see how this is in play with our poems. So as we read our 2 poems, we are going to use text descriptions and imagery to help us visualize. So this is a word we're going to be talking about a lot this week, visualization. And visualization can include sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and feelings, anything that makes a scene more real. So we're going to pause after every stanza or two and create a picture, movie, or even a sound clip in our minds about what we just read. You could use this visualize one moment in time, or you could visualize a sequence of events. Sometimes it's helpful to imagine what you're inside the scene described in the poem. Close your eyes and imagine the sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and feelings. The more vivid you make your visualization, the more real it will seem. And so if this would help you, write down this imagery that you can picture as you are reading each poem. So we're going to start with Robert Frost's Nothing Gold Can Stay. So we're going to cover up with my face. Oh, that didn't work. Tried to be clever. There we go. Go back. There we go. So Nothing Gold Can Stay. We're going to start with the left-hand side by Robert Frost. Nothing Gold Can Stay. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. We're going to read it one more time and then move on to the Dragonfly. Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. All right, and now we're going to read The Dragonfly by Louise Bogan. You are made of almost nothing, but of enough to be great eyes and diaphanous but double vans, to be ceaseless movement, unending hunger, grappling love. Link between water and air, earth repels you. Light touches you only to shift into iridescence upon your body and wings. Twice born, predator, you split into the heat. Swift beyond calculation or capture, you dart into the shadow which consumes you. You rocket into the day, but at last when the wind flattens the grasses, for you the design and purpose stop. And you fall with the other husks of summer. All right, we're going to read that one more time. The Dragonfly by Louise Bogan. You are made of almost nothing, but of enough to be great eyes and diaphanous double vans, to be ceaseless movement, unending hunger, grappling love. Link between water and air, earth repels you. Light touches you only to shift into iridescence upon your body and wings. Twice born, predator, you split into the heat. Swift beyond calculation or capture, you dart into the shadow which consumes you. You rocket into the day, but at last when the wind flattens the grasses, for you the design and purpose stop, and you fall with the other husks of summer. So those were the two poems, one by Robert Frost and one by Louise Bogan. Let's learn what we can from these poems. So let's take a moment and first understand what we read. So this is going to be a check your reading for both Nothing Gold Can Stay and The Dragonfly. So as we go through these questions, I want you to think in your head what the answer is, and then we'll go through the answers after reading all 4 questions. So the first question, what does the line, so dawn goes down to day in Frost's poem indicate? Is it the passage of time, the end of the poem, the speaker's obsession with sunlight, a change in the poem's point of view? That's question 1. Question 2, what is the main subject of Nothing Gold Can Stay? Number 1, the temporary quality of natural beauty. 2, the high price of gold. 3, the importance of keeping one's promises. Or 4, protecting the environment from pollution. Question 3. Which aspects of dragonflies are discussed in The Dragonfly? Select each correct answer. 1, that they have 2 sets of wings, that they die off in winter. 3, how they are born. 4, the food they eat. And 5, the size of their eyes. And then last question, which line from Bogan's poem comments on the fact that dragonflies are almost always flying? But at last, when the wind flattens the grasses, earth repels you, you are made of almost nothing, whiffed beyond calculation or capture. All right. So take a moment, think through your answers. If you need more time, pause the video, but we're going to go over the answers. So number 1, what does the line, so dawn goes down to day in Frost's poem indicate? This is the passage of time. So dawn goes down for the day. It's saying this time is setting or the day is done. So it's the passage of time. Number 2, what is the main subject of Nothing Gold Can Stay? It's about the temporary quality of natural beauty. It's that everything has a start and an end. And even like nature, where the leaves can fall and grow back again, there is an ending and a rebirth with our nature. Number 3, which aspects of dragonflies are discussed in the Dragonfly? They have 2 sets of wings, that they die off in winter, how they are born, and that's it. And then the final question, which line from Bogan's poem comments on the fact that dragonflies are almost always flying? Well, this one you had to look carefully at each of the sentences or phrases. And a lot of them are close, but there's only one correct answer. So let's look at it closely. But at last, when the wind flattens the grass. Nowhere in this it talks about the dragons flying, or we can even infer. So that's not the correct answer. Earth repels you. So maybe this is the correct answer. It's talking about the dragonflies and it's talking about the earth, but I'm not really sure if it's talking about the air. So let's compare it with the other answers. You are made of almost nothing. That's just talking about the makeup of the dragonflies. It's not really talking about their flying abilities. Whiffed beyond calculation or capture. This one is dealing with them whiffing through the air, so it's talking about how they're always flying. So that is the correct answer, whiffed beyond calculation or capture. All right, so let's break apart these separate poems for a moment. So we're going to first focus on Nothing Gold Can Stay. So Robert Frost's poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay, offers a depiction of nature. That's what he focuses on. Frost's poem comments on the fleeting essence of natural beauty. The poem does so through its use of descriptions, imagery, and illusion. So think about for a second what imagery or what images stood out to you. Think of that mental picture that was being painted as you were reading. And think about, was there any allusions made in this poem? I can think specifically of one when it says the word Eden. Now, we're going to talk about in a little bit about what that allusion is talking about. But if you were like, I recognize that word Eden, why do I recognize it? We'll talk about that in a sec. So when we're focusing on Nothing Gold Can Stay, we're talking about the natural beauty. The poem opens with a rhyming couplet. The first line of the couplet compares sunrise of nature's first green to gold. This comparison emphasizes the importance of the first moments of a day when the sun is rising. Like gold, the start of the day is extremely valuable. In the second line of the couplet, however, Frost reminds readers that the beauty of those first few golden moments does not last. The beautiful initial green cannot be maintained. This is what Frost means when he writes that the hue is the hardest one to hold. With these first 2 lines, the poet introduces the major theme of the poem, that momentary quality that characterizes natural beauty. And our poet chooses words very carefully. Often a word is chosen for its connotative meaning, which means its literal definition. Remember, a word's connotative meaning is the emotion, often a word is chosen for its connotative meaning along with its literal meaning. So a connotative meaning is the emotion that's associated with that word. So let's reread the opening lines of Nothing Gold Can Stay. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Well, Frost uses the connotative meaning of gold to suggest 2 things. The first is wealth, but then the second is the warm yellow light of dawn. Together, they emphasize the fleeting nature of wealth and yellow light dying. With the second rhyming couplet of the poem, Frost reinforces the theme of the poem. Again, he states how the natural world at the start of the day is lovely, and he makes this point by using a metaphor comparing a leaf at this time to a flower, an object that is generally accepted as an example of beauty. Frost chooses words with connotations or the emotions tied to the word. A flower is most beautiful when it first blooms, which lasts a short time. Blooming flowers bring to mind spring when all is new and fresh. And then just as he did with the first couplet, Frost reminds readers that this beauty does not last longer than an hour. By mentioning the fleeting beauty twice in the second and fourth lines of the poem, Frost establishes the mood of the poem. So if we reread part of the stanza, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold, her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. This poem then moves logically from this point to the next. If the most exquisite natural beauty is only temporary, one might wonder what happens as time goes on. Well, Frost answers this concern in the third rhyming couplet of the poem. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. This is coming back to the illusion I was talking about a second ago. When he says that leaf subsides to leaf, the poet means that the extraordinariness that was part of nature's early leaf, the one that he compared to a flower, is no longer there. The two leaves in this line are ordinary, unlike the flower. But then Frost does use an allusion to help readers understand this change that has occurred. He refers to Eden sinking to grief. This is a biblical allusion of talking about the Garden of Eden in Genesis in the Bible. This isn't to say this is a Christian poem, but this is saying that he's using an allusion that a lot of people understand of the Garden of Eden to illustrate the point that this once was paradise, this beauty that he's talking about, and it sank into something that is no longer beautiful or special, just like Eden. The Garden of Eden was once perfect, and then when man came in, sin entered, and then it was ruined. He's saying the same thing about nature. Man has destroyed nature with the passing of time. So when we read these last three lines of the poem of so Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay, the allusion to Eden emphasizes the sense of loss that exists in the poem. And just as the paradise of Eden is gone, the perfection of dawn gives way to the rest of the day. If we note Frost's extended meaning of dawn, we usually think of dawn as a rising sun. The sun climbs in the sky to begin day. He suggests a loss, a sinking from a high point, the special moment of dawn. The day is not as glorious or elevated as the time of dawn. The golden moment is lost. And Frost then returns readers to the start of the poem by again referring to gold. This repetition, or the poem's final line, nothing gold can stay, can be understood as a restatement of the theme that the most beautiful and valuable things cannot last very long. Now, that's a lot of information about nothing gold can stay, but we can see a lot of these similar things illuminated in the Dragonfly. So before you read a poem, it's always important to read the title. The title can offer important clues about the subject of a poem. So when we read the Dragonfly, when we look at this title of Louise Bogan's poem, it literally is telling us that this is going to be about a dragonfly. But if we ask ourselves, was this actually about a dragonfly? Or does the dragonfly represent something bigger? That's going to be a question we need to ask ourselves. So as we reread the first two stanzas of the Dragonfly, we need to pay close attention to the words and phrases that describe this dragonfly. So you are made of almost nothing, but of enough to be great eyes and diaphanous double vans, to be ceaseless movement, unending hunger, grappling love, link between water and air. Earth repels you, light touches you only to shift into iridescence upon your body and wings. The poet's word choice helps readers to visualize the dragonfly in a realistic way. We learn that the dragonfly has big eyes or great eyes, and that his wings are both diaphanous, double, and iridescent. We can picture its ceaseless movement between the water and the air, which the speaker claims is unending. Even earth repels or resists it. Thus, the poem uses this imagery to convey a tone of restless activity. And the words that this poet uses conveys a certain tone. So when we read the stanza, how is the tone shown through the words? So twice born predator, you split into the heat. Swift beyond calculation or capture, you dart into the shadow which consumes you. This stanza adds another layer of meaning with words and phrases that emphasizes the double nature of the dragonfly. These descriptions further develop the tone of restlessness to the point of aggression. The life of a dragonfly feels intense and wild. When we read the final two stanzas of the Dragonfly, we learn something new as well. You rocket into the day, but at last, when the wind flattens the grasses, for you the design and purpose stop, and you fall with the other husks of summer. What message is the speaker offering now, and how does the speaker feel about the passage of time? Well, the words that the poet uses describe the dragonfly's abrupt death. Once summer is over, the dragonfly disappears. Just as fast as it once rose like a rocket into the day, cool weather arrives and the dragonfly can no longer fly. The cold wind flattens the grass. It falls to earth like a dried up husk of corn, no longer what it was. So this all contributes to the theme in the dragonfly. So the poet began with words that describe an image. She formed the dragonfly in the reader's mind, and her tone started out as straightforward, almost scientific, like a textbook. But then she used words to add more meaning. They brought out a feeling of speed, intensity, and aggressiveness. The dragonfly moved so fast it almost was not there. And then just as the dragonfly was real to the reader, it's gone. The brief summer ends and the insect becomes lifeless, a dried up nothing. It no longer is moving, flying swiftly. With these transitions of word choice and tone, the poet points to an important message about life. All living things are like this dragonfly, according to the poet. We all have a full, fast life, and then suddenly we're gone. Her theme asks readers to ponder the fleeting nature of time and life. So with all this in mind and reading these two poems, you now are going to complete a practice Jamboard about Nothing Gold Can Stay and the Dragonfly. Please use what we have learned in the lesson today to show your understanding with this practice activity. To go above and beyond, say if you want to get a 4 in today's activity, you can write with a text box along with your multiple choice answers, evidence and reasoning to explain your answers. That is not mandatory, but if you want to shoot for a 4, explain your answers in a text box or a sticky note on the Jamboard. All right. Well, thanks for listening today, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.